U-PASS has a mission to assist all pilots in safety and standards. The following video is to help you stay compliant after receiving your 137. Finally, you have received the notification from the FAA docket that you have your 137. So now what? How do you keep compliant with your 137 without taking a class in FAA regulation speak? I'm going to walk you through some simple tips and tricks to help make this process easy. You can refer back to this video as often as you like to remind you what is expected. First, you must read through the exemption, all of it. Not that I'm expecting you to understand every word of the exemption, but you need to know what the exemption says you can and can't do. On ours, we have even created tabs on every page that lets us quickly jump from topic to topic so it can reference to most common conditions and limitations. Besides tabbing out the pages, we have created a quick reference page that goes in the front of the exemption directioning as to where the topics are within the exemption. It's important that everyone in your organization knows where to find setbacks, ground speed, flight operations, crew requirements, where operations can be conducted, basically all your conditions and limitations of the 137. Depending on the number of your exemptions, the page number of each condition and limitation will change. Most of the information in your exemption will stay consistent. But as exemptions are added, additional conditions and limitations will also be added. But let's start with two sections that will remain consistent regardless of the number of exemptions. They can be found one right after another and are required to be updated annually. They are your manuals and the operations that must be covered in those manuals. Now let's dive into these so you know what the FAA expects to find if you are ever audited. Your operations manual and training manual are live documents. These two manuals need to be updated annually as to what your pilots are doing in regards to training and operations. If it's in these manuals, then your chief pilot is required to be following those operations and training. This applies even if you are a pilot of one in your company. Additionally, these manuals must be accessible during all UAS operations and made available to any law enforcement upon request. Training must be documented and have some FAA-specific content. Look to those comprehensive operations list in the section of your exemption, usually around page 6 through 7, to ensure that your manuals are indeed covering a minimum of those requirements. As for annual training, U-PASS has a free written test that can be downloaded or done online as part of the documented annual training requirement. I would recommend it be followed up with a live in-field training or documented hours of flight added to the annual written test. In your exemption, you will also find a section with the heading Special Provisions. This section of your exemption will become longer and longer depending on how many exemptions you hold. Regardless, the general outline is the same for everyone. It will cover general provisions, safety of flight, coordination requirements, flight planning requirements, NOTAM requirements, reporting requirements, and emergency requirements. Let's spend some time here. The special provision has section listed A through G and starts with a general provision statement where it reads that your certificate shall be presented for inspection upon request by the FAA. So add a copy of your operating certificate to your crop flight drone logbooks so you can pull it up electronically anywhere. The general provision also says it can be canceled at any time for non-compliance or unforeseen safety factors, though it doesn't specify what that looks like. You may also be surprised by the FAA with a field inspection or on-site safety evaluation. Section B, Safety of Flight. This refers to your PIC responsibilities, including airspace for the safety of persons or property. It also covers safe operating distance of all activities and compliance of all airspace. Section C, Coordination requirements. Meeting requirements of airspace communication, issuance of proper distance of NOTAM and ATC, and MTR facilities in the proper time requirements. Section D, Flight planning requirements. Covering the visual meteorological conditions and specifying airspace and needed nautical miles from airports. It also states that drones must give way to any manned aircraft. Section E, NOTAM or Notice to Air missions. Every flight needs to file for a NOTAM unless otherwise told by the NOTAM operator it is not necessary. This section is where you will find the 800 number to call. Take notes of this call, including what the date is, who you talked with, and what they said. If they give you relief to future calls, make that note in your logbook. In case you are ever challenged by the FAA, they will go back to this call on this date and review to ensure your compliance. Section F, FAA reporting. This is a very important requirement. The FAA wants to see all your flights for the prior month by the 5th. Crop Flight Drone Logbook will automatically create a report with all the required information. If you are not using the crop flight drone logbook, please refer to Section F of your exemption special provisions to create your report. You are also required to report any incident or accident within 24 hours if it meets the criteria found in this same section. Before reaching out to the FAA, please read the required criteria. Finally, Section G, Emergency Procedures. The FAA wants to know that you have thought through your emergency procedure if you lose communication with your drone. This should be set in your controller before your first flight. The most important takeaway from this review is to file your NOTAMs and file your monthly FAA reports. These two things are trackable by the FAA for incompliance. The highlights from this video is that just getting your 137 isn't the end. You now need to keep it. The FAA is always updating regulations, and we will continue to bring you videos on how to stay compliant. To start, read your exemption. Next, update your safety and operating manuals annually. Document your annual training, even if you are a company of one. File the FAA required monthly reports. And finally, file NOTAMs for every flight unless you have been given verbal relief. Now get out there and fly right and stay compliant.